The first question is going to be started. The first respondent is going to be our current DA, Mrs. Egan. And the question is, California spends over $9 billion a year on corrections at both the state and county level. In developing policies for charging and plea bargaining, how will you consider the impact of these choices have on both the counties and the state's correctional budget?
Well, our charging decisions are based on the law, based on the facts that are presented to us by law enforcement officers in their police reports or original investigation of our own. And that's the charge of the district attorney. Was a crime committed? Did this person commit it? Do we have the evidence to prove it beyond reasonable doubt? We take those cases, we take them to court, we litigate them, which is the best thing about this judicial system in the United States is that there's an adversarial system, and we meet in the middle with a judge, who's the referee or a gatekeeper, and the truth will out. And then the sentencing is also a function of the judge. Now, we make recommendations, the defense makes recommendations, and as far as the $9 billion we spend on incarceration in the state, it's not typically part of the sentencing discussion. We are all aware of the jail situation. Defendants are aware of the jail situation locally, and it's there. Peripheral is there in everything we do, but it's not what a prosecutor has first and foremost in mind when we're proving a case.
Second question to you, Ms. Lisa.
In my humble opinion, after 16 years of being in the courtroom, the courts are not the gatekeepers of the charging of criminal cases. The district attorney is. It's a very serious and important role that the DA plays. The law enforcement officers bring us our business. They bring us reports. And sometimes things happen on the street that we cannot prove. The standards for law enforcement on the street is different than it is for lawyers in court and for DAs. And so I disagree that the courts are the gatekeepers. The filing is probably one of the most important roles of the district attorney, because sometimes cases arrests that are made cannot be made into cases because prosecutors have ethical obligations not to prosecute cases that they cannot prove beyond a reasonable doubt. So the goal of law enforcement is for safety, and the goal of law enforcement is to take reports about crime. And the role of the district attorney has to be to ensure that those cases are cases that can be made. They have to be evidence-based, and we have to make sure that they can reach the threshold of beyond a reasonable doubt, which is our threshold in court. As far as plea bargaining goes, the lack of the ability for Fresno County Deputy District Attorneys to plea bargain is one of the main reasons that I am standing in this room today, and I am not sitting at my desk continuing to do what I have done for 16 years, and that is seek justice for victims. Being a Deputy District Attorney is my passion. It is my life's work. It is what I have dedicated my career to. And if the DA's office and if the prosecutors in my office, my former office, were allowed to plea bargain, I wouldn't be here. We have policies that are archaic. We are not persecutors, we are prosecutors. And we cannot have blanket policies that restrict us from doing our business.
I should have said this also. I need your help and assistance also to make sure that I'm staying within inside of my time frame. So if you would hold your applause until the very end, that would also help us expedite our time this evening together. Ms. Egan, you have a 1-minute response?
Well, just in case my point misunderstood, the judge is the gatekeeper of the evidence. That's the checks and balances on the state prosecution arm. And we try to jury far less than 10% of the cases, so over 90% are plea bargained. I mean, they are settled one way or another short of trial, which is a negotiation that happens every day by every prosecutor in the courthouse.
Thank you. Second question goes to Ms. Lisa. The question is, studies show that racial disparities in drug law enforcement, despite the fact that white people and people of color use and sell drugs at the same rate. What is your plan to minimize these disparities in Fresno County's law enforcement?
That's a great question. I think the issue becomes one of where we have our law enforcement officers and how they are finding these cases that involve drugs, be it possession, be it sales, be it manufacturing. And I think there is most certainly a conversation that needs to happen about the types of investigations that go on and how they're conducted. But what we really need to focus on in our communities in order to prevent people, and especially young people, from the repeat cycle of drug use and drug addiction is we have to fix the problem. Putting somebody in jail or prison does not fix a drug addiction. And I know from personal experience, because my brother has an addiction problem, and he has had an addiction problem for 25 or 30 years. And he was the smart kid in the family. I was the one that followed. He has a master's degree and he's a member of Mensa, and he's also an addict. And it has been very difficult for me and my family to deal with that. And so I know that not only from a personal level, but a professional level, that the key to fixing the drug problem with our minorities and with our, whether it's white kids, black kids, or Mexican kids, Asian kids, is education and intervention. We have to get out into the community. And as district attorney, I will take that role. I will be out in the communities, be out in the faith-based communities, be out with the schools, interacting, not shutting myself off, not putting myself in an ivory tower, but getting out and talking to the people in the neighborhoods, whether they're southwest, southeast, because there's just as many drug problems in the north part of town as there is in the south part of the town. And we have to start coming together as a community to educate our children, provide them an alternative to gangs and drugs, and move on with keeping these kids out of the system.
Thank you. Ms. Egan, your two-minute response.
The question of racial disparity, if you look at the statistics of who's in the California Department of Corrections, there is a racial disparity. And that's a societal problem. I think as far as drugs, we're looking at changes that this state has engaged in. Prop 36 basically decriminalized drug abuse, but it is good at holding drug addicts accountable, and that's what's required. And that's why we do need room in the jail for drug addicts, to take them out of the street, off. I've heard so many parents say they were glad their child was in the jail because they knew their child wasn't out using and either going to overdose or get involved in crime. It's part of the rehabilitation process. And as district attorney, we've been stakeholders in the origination of the juvenile drug court. That's key, the juvenile arena. And we were part of the beginning of the juvenile drug court. That is a huge boon to this area. And it's an intractable problem, but that's what our magic unit goes after. Gangs, there's money in drugs. And we have to go after the people that are making the money selling drugs and devastating the families in this community.
Thank you. Woman's response.
Thank you. Well, I think the issue is not to put people who are addicts in jail, because whether we like it or not, we have overcrowded jails, and we need to keep our violent offenders in prison, and we need to keep our violent offenders and our repeat criminals who are out committing property crimes in jail. We don't need to keep our addicts in jail. And despite Mrs. Egan's comments, the research is actually quite contrary to what she has said. Incarceration does not cure addiction. And for anybody who believes that is ignorant. So what we need to do is we need to talk about truancy, we need to talk about education, and we need to start the conversations to find out what is going to fix this problem in our community. Not talk about Sacramento, not talk about Riverside, not talk about Los Angeles, but let's talk about Fresno. Let's get into our neighborhoods, let's get motivated, let's get together and fight this drug problem so we can keep our minority students in school and out of the jail.
Question number 2 will be Ms. Egan. It's a two-part question, so I'll try to get through both parts. With the understanding that you do not make the law, do you support creating an option to charge low-level drug possession as a misdemeanor rather than a felony? And the second part of the question is, we'd like for you to explain why or why not.
Well, many of the drug statutes we can charge as misdemeanors, not many, but a few of them. And you know, we have an ongoing discussion in my office about that. And we do at times charge, and we certainly dispose plea cases as misdemeanors that could be felonies. But that's based on the individual defendant. And often it's because the defendant comes with a plan that we feel comfortable, because we're about public safety. And if they have a plan that we believe is doable, if there is a bed at a rehab facility, then that speaks a lot to us, because it's going to protect that person, it's going to protect the public. But the fact is, we worked in the dependency courts. And we saw what drug abuse does to children. And you know, I can feel for the drug addict, but my job is the children that have skull fractures and broken bones because their parents are addicts and they are victimizing these children. So I understand on the one hand a misdemeanor and move them into rehab, but the fact is that this is has a devastating effect on the society, on the families. It's a ripple effect. Our economy, our families, the violence that is engendered by drug use. Decriminalizing drug use is a big topic, and people like to talk about it. We like to talk about it at our dinner table. But the fact is, I see the results of drug use and drug dealing, and my job is to protect the public.
Thank you. I think that the issue of decriminalizing drugs is you know, when you're talking about different drugs, you're talking about marijuana and the medical issues, you know, that's one issue. But when you're talking about heroin and cocaine and methamphetamine, you are talking about drugs that tear people's lives apart. They turn people into monsters. They take good, normal, healthy people who've been raised and reared in good families with good faith and good beliefs, and they turn them into people that nobody knows, nobody can recognize anymore. So the point of having this criminalization of drugs is so it serves as a deterrent to people and say, well, I'm not going to use drugs because I don't want to get a felony. But when you're an addict already, that's not a thought process that you go through. So again, it goes back to the education and the prevention that we really need to focus on, and fixing people and offering them opportunities. And do I think that cocaine and heroin should be misdemeanors? I don't think so. I think that we have to keep them at the felony level. And the reason that I say that is because we do have programs and we do have statutes. In California, we have PC 1000, which gives first-time users, not dealers, not manufacturers, not sellers, not pushers, users. It gives first-time users the opportunity to go into a program and have their case dismissed if they successfully complete. And when they come back, we also have a second program called Prop 36, which is for people who have been through PC 1000 or don't qualify for PC 1000. And they also, with a little bit more supervision and a higher level of supervision, have the opportunity to say, I want to be rid of drugs in my life. And are those programs effective? Not really, because if you look at the rates on success out of PC 1000 and success in Prop 36, they're very, very low. So it brings us all back to the same argument that we have to fix the problem. We have to put people in appropriate programs, and we can't be afraid to say that we need to educate and prevent.
Thank you. Question number 4. Ms. Lisa, what do you think is the best way to deal with the low-level drug offenders?
I think I might have answered that already 3 times. You know, I don't know that there is such a thing as a low-level drug offender, because if you've ever been in the life of an addict, it's a very serious thing when they're stealing your TV or your blender or your credit card. Drug use leads to identity theft. It leads to people stealing mail. It leads to people stealing cars and stealing wallets and cracking windows to steal cell phones. And again, we have to focus on fixing this problem, and we have to focus on getting our kids and our adults who get addicted into programs that work, not programs that satisfy people so that they don't have to be put in jail, or satisfy you know, courts just to get rid of them for the day. We have to concentrate on putting money and resources and community involvement into getting people who have these, what we call low-level drug offenders, and get them into treatment and get them fixed and help them fix their addictions so that they don't continue on to a life of crime. Because low-level drug cases turn into property cases. They turn into property crimes. They steal cars. When they steal cars and they get involved in the system, they lose their jobs. They drop out of school, and then all of a sudden they have nowhere to go. So if we don't get to the root of the problem, we're just going to keep doing what we've been doing, and that's spinning our wheels.
Yeah, I think there's some agreement here that drug crimes have a horrendous cost on individuals, families, this community, and people's lives and futures. So I think our office doesn't have rose-colored glasses on drug use and drug abuse and the crimes that spin off of that. The Criminal Justice Coordinating Council and the CCP, the Community Corrections Partnership, which is part of realignment, we have put millions of dollars through the CCP on one of the votes towards rehabilitation, evidence-based choices on who should be in which program, and also we're pressing them for their success rate, because we want to put the money in the most successful programs. And that's part of it, but you have to have a consequence, because a user in the throes of using does not want to quit. I've been in the courthouse with a mother who's turned around and her daughter was gone. Her daughter was going to Prop 36 court. Her daughter didn't want to go to Prop 36 court. Her daughter wanted to be out on the streets using. So there is a place for inpatient, there is a place for incarceration when appropriate, and that's what we have to do. Decriminalizing drugs is immoral. It's giving up on people.
I don't know that there is a best way to handle. I don't think there's a blanket reason. I don't think there's a blanket answer to this issue. This issue has to be handled in our homes, in our churches, in our schools. And again, I just keep coming back to the same thing. We have to stand together as a community. And to suggest that there is a one quick fix or a one-size-fits-all answer to this problem. Everybody uses drugs for a different reason. Some people are born into it. Some people choose it. Some people are exposed to it. I attended a seminar today where a gal said she was exposed to drugs by her babysitter, or a person that her parents trusted. Some parents in our world actually give their children drugs. So we have to find the systemic root of these problems. And using the criminal justice system as a catch-all and using the criminal justice system as a deterrent certainly has a place, but it is not just, to incarcerate is not just the only answer.
Thank you. For those of you who are hockey fans, that's the end of the first period. Real quickly, those of you who have cards that are submitted that you want to be picked up, please raise those so we can start kind of picking those up. Those of you who would like to have a card to fill out a question that you may have, please raise up your hand. We'll walk around and collect. If you would like to have a card, please keep your hand raised. Can we have 2 people passing out cards as well, or a couple of people? So we can kind of get through the process a little bit later.
Take it.
Okay, so we're going to move on. We're at question number 5. And question number 5 is going to be responded to first by Mrs. Egan. And the question has 3 parts. What has been the impact of the 3 strikes legislation in Fresno County? What has been the cost effect? And should any changes be made with this application?
Prop 36, 3 strikes, or 3 strikes as it is. The result of 3 strikes is crime is down. Since 3 strikes was instituted in the mid-90s, violent crime went down. And there were thousands and thousands, there's different estimates, but up to 30,000 fewer victims because we took the 20% of the people causing 80% of the violent crime and we put them in prison. And so 3 strikes works. There is discretion in filing, there's discretion in the court in sentencing, so there are checks and balances in the system and crime is down. The scare tactic, or maybe it was legitimate, that the state prisons would be overrun, did not happen. We can look back now and see that did not happen because of 3 strikes. There are fewer than 300 3 strikes commitments statewide. We have a 3 strikes committee. We look at every case that is eligible for 3 strikes in the office, and we have deputy DAs and managing DAs, and I'm there when I can be there, and we review those cases and decide if we're going to file that 3rd strike as a 25 to life. So it is a really focused crime-fighting tool that is effective. Now, the people voted Prop 36 last year, which changed the 3 strikes scheme. The 3rd strike must be a violent or serious. And that was there was discussion since the institution, the passage of 3 strikes to do that. The state has done that. That is, we are all watching right now because Fresno County had about 52 people eligible for resentencing. And they have come in and one of our most experienced deputy DAs is the point person on that. He's reviewing all those cases. We are staffing them, and we are in court with arguing that primarily we're arguing they need supervision if they're going to be released, which almost all have been released. Oh, yeah. So we're watching that very carefully, and we will be watching it. And our biggest hope is they don't reoffend.
Thank you. The 2-minute response.
Thank you. I'm not aware of the research that says that 3 strikes is the reason that crime is down. I'd like to see that research. The impact of 3 strikes, I'm a fan of 3 strikes. I think it's a great law if it's used properly. This is the first time that I have ever heard this district attorney say that there is discretion in filing 3 strikes cases in the Fresno County DA's office, and I find it quite interesting in this environment that that's the first time I've heard that. Because the prior policy that I always knew and abided by and had to work under was that we plead and prove every strike. Mike Reynolds endorses Mrs. Egan. I'm not sure, I'm not aware that Mrs. Egan herself has ever prosecuted personally a 3 strikes case. She talks about 3 strikes a lot. And 3 strikes as it was written had the ability for prosecutors and judges to use discretion. That never happened in the DA's office. There was a plead them all and prove them all. That was it. That was the policy. And that was, Mrs. Egan's on record saying that. So what is the cost effect of that? Again, we go back to reasonableness and justice. And that's why my political statement is truth and justice, not politics. Because it's very easy to be one-dimensional. It's very easy to be a DA or a prosecutor who stands up and says, I prosecute all 3 strikes cases every time, all the time. That's easy. What's hard to do is to explain to victims or to explain to law enforcement officers when it's not appropriate. And the California voters have said through the Prop 36 passage that it is not appropriate every single time. So the effect of 3 strikes is that we have overcrowded prisons. The effect of 3 strikes is that we have realignment now because our prisons were at 170% of their capacity. And 3 judges from the federal court said, get them out. And that's why we have realignment.
Thank you.
There were a lot of statements in that response, but the fact is the DA's office follows the law. And before the initiative, Prop 36, changing the scheme on 3 strikes, we were following the law. We had discretion. The law said if we have the proof, then we pursue the case. And we did. And there was always, I was a deputy DA, and a couple years in, up in the executive office, arguing that we shouldn't file a 3 strike on a case. I did that as a 3 or 4 year deputy DA. In our office, it's always been there, but you have to come up and be able to articulate why. The fact is, the voters in this state passed Prop 36 and changed the scheme. And once they did that, we formed our committee, and we are looking at every single strike case, because it was the will of the people, and that is the law.
Thank you. Question number 6. Do you want California to keep the death penalty? This is to you, Ms. Lisa.
As district attorney, it is your job to enforce the law. And the way that the death penalty statute is written now is very specific. In order to seek the death penalty, the district attorney has to find special circumstances. And those special circumstances are very clearly enumerated in the code. You have to have one of those circumstances. And as the district attorney, you have the option, when you have what we call a special circumstances murder, to choose to pursue life without the possibility of parole or the death penalty. And I believe that the voters in California have made the statement that they believe the death penalty should be an option, but my belief is that it should be an option that is used very, very rarely, only in the most serious of circumstances. There is a lot that goes into determining whether or not somebody should be subjected to the death penalty. And as district attorney, I think I have an obligation, if I were elected into that position, to take that as probably the most serious responsibility that you could have as a district attorney, is to evaluate that case for the facts for the circumstances, taking into consideration what do the victims of this crime want? What is the history of this defendant? Where did he come from? Where did she come from? What is her background? What are the circumstances? What is the egregiousness of the facts of the case? The callousness, and what is the will of the victim? I think that's something very important to take into consideration. And as district attorney, I will abide by that and hold that responsibility as a very, very, very serious one.
I, along with the majority of the voters, at least in the state, support the death penalty. And it is the most serious decision a district attorney makes. And when a case is presented to me, I seek the input of the most experienced people in the office. I invite the input of the defense attorney. And it's the most solemn decision. We have used charging very judiciously, as I have as district attorney. The last person executed in this state was a crime out of Fresno County where 3 young people were murdered. There are some, horribly murdered, there are some crimes that are so horrific they warrant the death penalty. And I am cognizant of the responsibility. I don't shy away from the responsibility. And it's not a decision that any elected DA would make without a calm, thorough investigation into the case, the facts, the defendant, with input from all sides.
Thank you. Your 1 minute rebuttal?
No rebuttal.
Okay. Going on to question number 7. Ms. Egan, this question is to you. What measures will you take to ensure ethnic diversity of the lawyers, investigators, and other personnel that work for the district attorney's office?
Good question. We've done a lot to affect the diversity of the district attorney's office. We send DAs and supervising chief deputies to colleges, law schools, to encourage people to apply in Fresno County. I'll speak from my actions. And this came up during the campaign. It came up from specifically one of the people I promoted. I am the first woman district attorney. I promoted the first African-American assistant district attorney, top management in the office, who's now on the bench. I appointed the first female chief of homicide, the first Hispanic chief of our Bureau of Investigations. That's just what I've done, but I've done that because they were the best people for the jobs. Now, I'm very cognizant. I really believe the courtroom, and when someone walks into the courthouse, they should see judges, prosecutors, defense attorneys, officers, deputies, of representing the entire community. I think there's a sense of even-handed justice when you look around, if you're Hmong or if you're black or Hispanic or white, and the defense attorney, the prosecutor, the judge, there's everybody there in the mix. I think it's a really good thing for this community, especially as diverse as ours. And I have made it an effort. We have great minority prosecutors, investigators in the office. I'm very proud of it. And I think we were always looking to expand and keep the diversity in the office reflective of the community. But hiring is based on their skills and their talents and their desire, and promotion the same. So we're colorblind, but I am cognizant of our service to the public and the appearance to the public. They have to feel represented by their prosecution office. Thank you.
Your 2-minute response?
Sure. There are many things that Mrs. Egan and I disagree upon, and they have been coming out during this campaign, but I have to say this is not one of them. I have been a proud member of the Fresno County District Attorney's Office for 12 years, and I have to compliment Mrs. Egan on everything that she said, and I will agree with everything that she said. We have a very racially diverse office. I don't see color. I know the people that I work with don't see color. Do we want more? Sure, we do. I'm proud to say that I have a lot of friends in the office that are black and Hispanic and Asian, and there's a lot of white people too. And we all get along. It's always been, up until recently, a great place to work and a place that I feel proud to work. If I were the district attorney, I would continue that legacy to promote racial diversity in all aspects of our office, from the secretarial staff to the investigative staff onto the lawyers. And again, going back to that same thing, because I have my own 2 children who I want to be motivated and encouraged is that as district attorney, I will be out in the community, not just going out and sending my lawyers out to recruit at law schools, but going out into the community, into Southwest, Southeast, Northwest, Northeast Fresno, and showing people who I am and what I've done, and bringing members of my office with them to be involved in student activities, in youth centers, so that they can say, I want to be like her. I want to be like that lady. Because my mom, who's sitting right here, was told when she was a young girl that she shouldn't go to college because she was just going to get married and have babies. And she told me the opposite. And she taught me to be brave, and she is my hero. And she taught me to be fearless, and she taught me to go out and get it. And that's what I want to do for the kids in this community, because it was done for me.
Well, I think we've covered it. It's an important facet of the office, and you know, I could expand that we have programs now that we bring in students in undergrad, in law school, in master's programs into the office to work with us, see what we do, help us do our work, and hopefully attract them into our office as they finish their education. So we've instituted formalized pre-bar, post-bar law programs, and it's helping because a lot of times we have to recruit from outside the area into the office, and that helps us find really good people that become invested in our office, and it's been very successful in our most recent hires as deputy DAs.
Thank you. I'll apologize up front because this next question is kind of cumbersome, so I'm going to try to get through this as best I can. Question number 8, and it's to Ms. Lisa. 63% of people in California's jails are being held pre-trial. What steps will you take to safely reduce the pre-trial incarceration numbers in Fresno County's jails?
Oh, this is my favorite topic of the campaign. Okay, so in Fresno County we have 69% at last count of our inmates who are pre-trial, which means they are not serving a sentence. They are still waiting to figure out what the disposition of their case is going to be. Is it going to be a trial? Is it going to be a plea? Is it going to be a dismissal? What's going to happen to them? And here's what the DA's office can do to stop that overcrowding and stop that bottleneck and stop that issue of stagnant inmates at the jail. Is number 1, clean up our filing. Whether we need more people in filing, whether we need more different people with different qualities and different training and different perspective in the filing department, that's the first thing we need to do is clean up the filing. We don't have to file cases that don't belong in the courts. And we have to be able to communicate with law enforcement and victims if those cases are not going to be filed, and that is not happening right now. The second thing is we have to train our prosecutors to be prosecutors, because when lawyers come into the DA's office, they are not prosecutors. A prosecutor has to connect with people. A prosecutor has to get people to trust them. And I've been a prosecutor, and I'm proud to be a prosecutor. And when you can get people to trust you, and you are trained, and you have the belief from your office that you can go to court and do your work and do your business and settle cases for what you know they are worth, and not what somebody over in the ivory tower across the street tells you that they're worth. Because nobody knows a case better than the prosecutor himself or herself. And so we have to provide the training so that we can return the discretion to the prosecutors. We have lost 123 prosecutors during Mrs. Egan's tenure, and that is why we do not have well-trained prosecutors. These kids are coming in too young, and they're put into felony assignments before they've had a chance to be trained, before they've had a chance to flourish and develop into the prosecutors they need to be.
Thank you.
Understand 20, a lot of things touched on there. This up until recently is the theme here, because up until recently my opponent didn't complain about this, but never came over and said, hey, she was in charge of 7 prosecutors, and she was in charge of the pleas and offers that they were made. So this is all recent and it's political. The fact is our filing team is comprised of the most experienced prosecutors we have, a couple retirees that are 25, 30 years in. They know how to evaluate a case. I created a dedicated filing team just for that purpose, so that they are there. They're there to work with law enforcement, have the arguments that you have to have with law enforcement about filing cases. And as far as attrition, I mean, you've heard of straw man argument. Our attrition since 2000 has been absolutely consistent. it's 20% to retirement, 18% to other lawyering jobs, 13%, I don't know, I have the numbers, 13% to the bench. It's been absolutely consistent, about 10 people a year. Our attrition rate increased during the 2 years that the Board of Supervisors voted to cut the pay of the prosecutors. Right, and I told the board that they can park in the same parking lot and make $10,000 or $20,000 more going to a different office than ours. We invested in those people, we hired them, we trained them, we invested in them, and they've walked away. But they've only walked away for the money because they are taking care of their families. I've had people leave that have come back. Can I come back? Absolutely come back. You're ours. And training, we have a formalized training program that is recognized by the state bar. We provide every year as much MCLE training as our lawyers need. We do it in-house, we save money that way, their peers are training them, we bring outside instructors. This is a formalized training program that was not there when I was elected.
Thank you. Do you want 1 minute rebuttal?
Yeah, I would love to rebut that. I'm a prosecutor, so I bring exhibits with me. And this is yet another text message between me and Mrs. Egan about morale in the office and my complaints about it. This is the second time in a public forum that she said that she's never heard it before I ran. Here it is, another text message. Maybe this one will end up in Fresno Me too. Anyone can see it afterwards. Everyone in this office knows that morale is low, and everybody is afraid to say it. Well, you know what? I'm not afraid to say it anymore. It has got to stop.
Good for you.
Recently, recently things have changed since Kelly Keenan arrived and Elizabeth Egan abandoned our office. He has taken over, he has put in these policies, and he has made it unspeakable in the DA's office. The morale is low, it's a hostile work environment, nobody has discretion, and for her to sit here and say that is not the truth.
That you'd like to have your question possibly read, please raise them right now. We're going to be collecting them. We are not going to be giving out any more cards, as there is already quite a few that we have. Okay, and I have to say this. For those of you who don't know me, my background is in education. I've been in education for the last 24 years. And your applause, although you think that you are showing support, is actually rooted in this forum. You are cutting into the time of the ladies to be heard by everyone. This should be an opportunity for us to hear from the two candidates about who they are, what their stances are. Your show of support then should come out on June 3rd or vote by mail ballot when whoever you vote for. So please, let's hold our applause until the very end. I promise you will have an opportunity to stand up and click your heels if you want to at the very end for the person that you appreciate. So please hold your applause at the very end. Okay. So question number 9 is going to Mrs. Egan. Okay, it is one. There are 2 parts to this question as well. What is your position on officer-involved shootings? What specifically will you do to restore community trust and confidence in the Fresno County's law enforcement agencies?
Position on officer-involved shootings. It's a tragedy. Officer-involved shootings are the bane of law enforcement. I mean, a sworn peace officer taking the life of a citizen. There's nothing worse than that. But the reality is the officers are out there on the streets and their lives are put in danger. And at times there are shootings. It's a tragedy when anyone's shot. When it's a law enforcement officer and a citizen, a civilian, it's a tragedy. The DA's office has always been involved in officer-involved shootings. We are the independent arm. We are the executive officers out there, and we have very experienced investigative bureau and prosecutors that go out and we don't do an independent investigation per se, but we monitor the investigation. We walk the scene. We listen to every interview. We do follow-up investigation if we feel it's necessary. We staff officer-involved shootings to discuss what happened. We invite the law enforcement agency to come and talk to us about what happened after we've analyzed it. There is a structure. We got out of that business for a short period of time when we had layoffs. I had a homicide prosecutor come in from being out all night on an officer-involved shooting scene, and then he was in court handling a homicide. And I said, you know what? We've hit the bottom here. Our prosecutors make no overtime doing that. They do it because it's good government. But I said, we can't do this because our job is to be in that court prosecuting that homicide. We can't do this to our people. And it was a very tough decision, and the board did not or was not able to support our officer-involved shooting team at the time. The minute we had the staffing, we're still 44 people down, by the way, from those times. The minute we felt we could, I discussed it with our staff, they agreed, they volunteered. Our investigators don't get standby pay, and our prosecutors get nothing but comp time, which they usually can't take. They want to do it. They want to be there because this community needs us there. And we got back into that.
Thank you.
And we will stay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Your 2-minute response.
Well, I was a member of the officer-involved shooting team while I was on the homicide team as a homicide prosecutor, and I went out on several officer-involved shootings. I don't know that Mrs. Egan has ever had that benefit of actually going out on one, but I have, and not everybody, there's not always a death. Sometimes there's just a shooting. So whether somebody is shot at or killed, the DA's office has the responsibility to go out and do an independent investigation. And the bottom line is the DA's office goes out to determine was it a clean shoot. Investigators go out and attorneys go out. And we participate with the investigating agency, and the whole issue is so that the shooting agency doesn't investigate itself. So it's a checks and balances. And I've been out there, and I think that the issue is when you're saying your position on officer-involved shootings, no officer likes to shoot. The issue with officer-involved shooting is that we have too many guns in the hands of felons. Too many guns on the street in the hands of felons. We need to keep guns because to me, officer-involved shootings, the issue and the place is the discussion revolves around guns, and it revolves around gang members in possession of guns, and it revolves around young people involved in possession of guns, because these are the irresponsible people that are getting into these shootings. Because officers don't shoot unless they are threatened. And no officer likes to shoot anybody, no officer likes to kill anybody. It's a very traumatic event for the officers. I think in some of the communities or the way it's portrayed in the media, it's, oh, a cop took out another bad guy, or a cop took out another kid. That's not it. I've been out there. I've been out on the street in the fog at 2 o'clock in the morning, standing there, seeing the officers shake, seeing them be scared, seeing them be fearful, seeing them having their lives threatened and having to discharge their weapon. Some officers go through their whole lives without ever discharging their weapon, their whole careers. So when they do, it's a traumatic event. And I think the issue then becomes we need to get guns out of these kids' hands.
Okay, so we're going to move on to question number 10. Question number 10 is to Ms. Lisa. What is your opinion on Chief Jerry Dyer's war on the Bulldogs? And what will you do to assure our communities of color that they will not continue to suffer the breakup of families under the guise of fighting crime?
Well, I think as a law enforcement community, we have to address the gang problem. It just is, it is rampant in our communities. I think that most law-abiding citizens in this community do not realize the threats that the gangs bring to all of us every single day. Gang members are in our malls, they're in our movie theaters. I don't take my children to the mall to see the Easter Bunny or to see Santa, because I don't take my children to the mall. It's a dangerous place. I grew up going to Fashion Fair. My mom used to drop me off there to go shopping with my friends. I don't do that for my children because there are gang members everywhere, and we don't even realize sometimes that they're in our midst. And they have one thing in their mind, and that is to promote their gangs, sell their drugs, run and traffic young girls and women, steal cars. That's how they make their livings. They're not stupid people, these gang members. And they're ruining our communities. So for Chief Dyer to take a tough stance on gangs, I think is a very important part of our law enforcement here in Fresno. And I fully support his efforts because the gangs have declared war on us, whether we like it or whether we don't. Now, as far as the minority issues go, and there's no room for profiling, there's no room for police brutality, there's no room for disparagement in using race as a factor. But what we have to do is we have to change, going back again to that same thing with keeping these kids out of the gangs is very important, showing them an alternate way of life. There is a huge faith-based community, an African-American community down in Southwest Fresno that are church-going, law-abiding people. It's not just a bunch of gangbangers. We need to bring these kids back into church, bring them back into their families so that we can do that. And we have to continue to fight the war on gangs and on drugs for everyone in our community.
Thank you. Ms. Egan, your 2-minute response.
I'm the only sitting DA who's prosecuted an officer in the line of duty, to my knowledge, for conduct while on duty. That is a tough decision to make. It's not a popular decision to make. And there are political consequences to making that kind of decision. But no one's above the law. No one's below the law. I don't care who you work for, who you are, what you do. And the fact is that our police officers are brave people. They work very hard, but no one is above the law. And this DA is not going to let anyone be above the law, no matter the cost. But what I'll tell you about gangs, this district attorney's office has also revolutionized the fight on gangs. We have instituted 7 gang injunctions. The purpose of those is to free neighborhoods from the grip of a gang. And we have done it successfully. It's very complex litigation, and I'll give you an example. We went back, like we do, 10 months after the gang injunction was granted by the court. And I'm going to give you what we heard. And we went door to door in this geographical safety zone, they call it. It's a neighborhood is what it is. And 80% of the residents said gang activity had decreased. 65 said that that crime had reduced. So gang activity and crime reduced, and 80% of the citizens in that community felt that way. And here's the big one, 78% told us that they feel safer in their homes. Their children can play, their businesses thrive. That's what the district attorney's office has done. It didn't start until I was elected, and it won't stop, because it is freeing people from the grips of the gangs, while we have a heavy law enforcement presence on the gangs who are shooting and killing and dealing drugs in this county.
Thank you. Your 1-minute rebuttal.
I think that didn't answer the question about Chief Dyer's war, so I'll just pass on the rebuttal.
Question number 11, Mrs. Egan. As district attorney, there's 2 parts to this question. As district attorney, what will you do to develop a trusting relationship with the immigrant community of our county? To what extent would you take, start over again. To what extent would you take immigration status into effect in the charging and plea bargaining process?
You know, victims of crime have no color and no immigration status in our office. Defendants, the cases referred to us are based on a person who committed a crime and the evidence that that person committed a crime. And that's what we do, and that's what we look at, and that's how we charge cases. Immigration is a legislative function. It's not a DA's function. It's really not part of what we do. We are protecting victims. We are prosecuting criminals. And a victim doesn't have a color.
I'm sorry, we're reading the next question. I apologize for that. And we are at your 2-minute response.
Thank you. To say that a defendant doesn't have immigration status when they come into the DA's office for filing is ignorance, because every person who is here illegally who gets into trouble with the law has immigration consequences for them. And it is not only immigration consequences for the person, it is immigration consequences for their family. The #1 job of the district attorney's office is to do justice. Justice. Not to be a persecutor, not to be a public defender, but to do justice. And immigration status is not something that we know most times when we file cases. We file cases, we get police reports, we get rap sheets. That information doesn't tell us the immigration status. And as a practicing lawyer for 16 years, I know that most times when I find out that a defendant has an immigration issue, it's not until I get to court and they have an attorney who comes to me and says, hey, this guy has we used to call it INS because I'm old, but now it's called ICE. This guy has an ICE hold, and that's the first time that you are made aware that that is a consequence for these people. And there are certain crimes
that people get deported for and certain crimes that people don't get deported for. And to take immigration into account when making an offer is inappropriate. It's not lawful. However, when recommending a sentence to a court, and it is the judge's job most times to determine what that sentence is, the DA can have input in it. There is nothing wrong with being just. And if you have a person who has 5 children who are here, who are American citizens, and they are going to be deported, that's something that can definitely be discussed with the judge. Can it be taken into consideration when dealing with the evidence? No. But it certainly can be discussed. And as district attorney, I would encourage my deputies always, and never put any kind of sanction on them if they were participating in a discussion that was, that had the ends to be justice. Sorry.
Well, I don't know, immigration and violations of the immigration laws is a U.S. attorney's job. So I think my opponent agreed that when we file cases, we don't take into consideration immigration status. Anything can be discussed in a courtroom. Any defense attorney can raise anything they want. It's all fair game in any kind of discussion. Just bar through that.
Thank you. Before we go, that's the end of the prearranged questions, and I have 5 questions here, 5 cards. First, I want to thank all of you who turned in cards. They said it was about 100 cards that they received, and so there were 5 cards that I have in front of me now that I'll be asking those questions. We're going to follow the same format, and as question 11 was first Ms. Egan, next question is Ms. Lisa. And I ask for your indulgence because some of you writers need to go back to kindergarten. Not really good. I will get through this with your help and indulgence. Okay, so the first question from the audience. Okay, so Ms. Smittcamp. Sometimes a jury cannot agree and it is necessary to retry a case. In the past, the DA's position was that multiple retrials, in parentheses, even up to 4, may be necessary to obtain a conviction. At what point is it an injustice is the first question, and the second part of it is a misappropriate. Wait, hold on. Okay. At what point is it an injustice or a misappropriation of resources? So I guess the question is in 2 parts. I want to know at what point is that an injustice, and what point is it a misappropriation of resources?
I think that when you take a case to trial, you have to have confidence and you have an ethical obligation to believe that you can prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, does that mean that we take cases to trial that don't sometimes result in what we call a hung jury, where not everybody is unanimous? No, that happens. The decision to retry a case has to be one that is based on the evidence, because sometimes there are what we call runaway juries. Sometimes you have judges who will agree with you, and you have the whole court staff, and you have both even prosecution and defense attorneys who say, how did we get there? How did that happen? Because things happen inside the jury room that none of us are privy to. So what you have to do is go back to the drawing board. And when you have a hung jury, you usually know what we call the split. Is it 11-1 for not guilty? Is it 6-6, guilty, not guilty? And that is something that you take into consideration when determining whether or not to retry a case. In my experience, I've only had one hung jury, but in my experience with other lawyers in my office is that you look at the evidence and you look at the state of your witnesses, because this is what's so important about training prosecutors and having this office be led by somebody who is a prosecutor and who has been in the dirt and who understands what goes on in court. Not what goes on in political circles, not what goes on in committees, but what goes on in court is that you have to be able to take that evidence and you have to understand your witnesses, because your witnesses are what gives you the impetus to take your case to trial. If you have a witness who is weak and who can't communicate, that is a factor that you take into consideration when determining, am I going to retry this case or not? And if your evidence is weak, you have an ethical obligation not to proceed. So in those cases where we know crimes have happened and we know that they didn't go well with the jury, the opportunity for settlement arises. And that's where we have to use judicial economy, and we have to use common sense, and we can't be fearful. We can't just say, try it again and lose. We have to be conscientious.
Your 2-minute response?
Thank you. A hung jury or mistrial is part of the the judicial process. It's the jury system. It's the best system in the world. A couple things. I can't think of one case actually. It was an attempted murder that we tried, and I'll tell you that the case hung the first trial, and it hung in favor of guilt. And when a case hangs, you know, the supervisor, the chief, depends on how far up it has to go up the chain. There's discussions about that. You know, what happened with the evidence? What happened? Should we retry it? Should we make an offer? There's discussion every time on those cases. But in this one I'm thinking of, it hung. We retried it, and when the court instructed the jury, they did instructional error. They misspoke in the jury instructions. It was reversed. So it didn't change the fact of the conduct. This guy tried to kill someone and actually shot someone. And then it returned, we tried it again, and there was juror misconduct. I mean, it's totally out of the prosecution's control. There was juror misconduct, and that case was reversed. And it was back to try again. Now what do we say? Hey, defendant, you got lucky. You know, you shot this woman, but gee, the judge made a mistake, a juror made a mistake, and so you get a get out of jail free card. Sorry, we tried it again. Now you can read about it in the media and say, oh my gosh, they tried that case 4 times. We tried it and hung it. We tried it and convicted. The juror and the judge got in the middle of that. I mean, that's what happens in real life in the courtroom. And but that's rare. But that's one case I know that was covered in the media. But it's hard to get all the details out often in a story.
Yep. One member vote.
That's probably a very unique and rare example of how cases are retried. Again, we have to have reasoned and smart, efficient policies in the DA's office. And assessing everything on a case-by-case basis, based on the evidence, based on the witnesses, based on the history, is an extremely important thing to do. And that's not happening now. Right now in the DA's office, trials are emphasized, trials are praised, and people are made to try cases that they do not believe they can ethically prosecute. And that is what needs to change.
Okay, question number 13 is going to begin with Ms. Egan. The question is, what is the role of the district attorney in investigating excessive use of force by police? And what is a reasonable time frame for conducting those investigations?
Well, we talked about that, and we have prosecuted officers on an excessive force case. But the fact is, the individual law enforcement agencies investigate their own, and they refer a case to us. And I think that our law enforcement agencies in this county are honest when they investigate their own. They separate it from there's IAs and there's lots of rules and laws surrounding peace officer employment that have to be recognized in order to build a case. You can't violate one person's law and exclude evidence that will need to prosecute them. Anyways, our job is to be there when we're requested to parallel an investigation. Is to be there to do the follow-up and ask the tough questions and demand further investigation if we feel that it is required in order to make an evaluation on whether there should be charges pressed against a police officer for excessive force. And we've done that.
Thank you. Your 2-minute response.
Excessive force by law enforcement officers is something that is looked down in the law enforcement community, is looked down upon by law enforcement agencies, and it is looked down on by deputy district attorneys and district attorneys. It is a system that needs to be taken into, the investigation of these crimes is very, very, very serious. And the law enforcement agencies do investigate their own crimes. They have internal affairs. They have internal affairs officers who are specially assigned to do that when these things happen. And that is inherently sort of conflict. And that's an issue that a lot of people have. So the role of the district attorney's office has to be to be able to investigate and audit those reports when they come in to ensure that they are done ethically and they are done responsibly. We do have an investigations bureau within the DA's office, and those cases need to be looked at with a little bit more scrutiny probably to ensure that the information that's coming from the agency is in fact legitimate and it is done correctly And there needs to be just sort of a double checking, I think, to make sure that the statements are taken correctly and all the information is provided to the DA's office so that a proper determination can be made.
Next question, number 14, Ms. Lisa. The question is, and this is in reference to the DA's office, we'll leave that out of the question. What are the current methods of dealing with elder abuse and identifying cases? Would you institute any changes or innovations?
Well, right now we have one deputy district attorney assigned to elder abuse, and there is always room for improvement in any unit. In my unit, when I ran into homicide and gangs and anything. The thing I think that we need to do better in the DA's office right now is getting out there and interacting. And the person who's assigned to elder abuse does a great job. There's no doubt about it. He is out there. He is doing that, reaching out to communities, because some people don't even understand what elder abuse is. And it is a sort of a silent crime. It is committed by people who do not have a voice of their own. They are being abused because they're in a situation where they are dependent on other people, be it paid caretakers or family members, who are taking care of them. So I think something that we could do to improve that is to reach out to the medical community for doctors and emergency rooms and different medical providers who may see these people and understand the way that we've raised awareness with domestic violence and child abuse, where we have mandatory reporting now for child abuse for teachers, and we have a long list of people that are mandatory reporters for child abuse. We need to do that for our elders, and we need to start making the community more aware of the signs that we need to look for so that we can protect that segment of our population.
Thank you.
What I would do is clone our deputy DA in the elder abuse unit. He's a really, really tough prosecutor. He, took the toughest cases and won them. And I said, I want you to go to elder abuse. He said, what? And I talked to him, how you doing? How's it going? He said, my people are under siege. He got into this area of law and crime, and he couldn't believe it. And he works with the detectives and all the agencies and adult protective services. And he is really good at getting restitution. Stealing money from an elder, there's financial crime and there's physical abuse. And you steal an elder's retirement, they can't go make it up. They can't go back out and work and replace that money. And he gets restitution as part of pleas. He sends people to prison. He takes the tough cases, and he has a personal investment. And he's reinvigorated the detectives in those crimes because they have a prosecutor who's after working with them. Let's get them, let's do the extra work. Financial crimes are very complex. He goes after it. What I would do is increase that unit and have 4 more prosecutors just like him. He's also out in the community, and he leads when they come and do big elder abuse conferences. He's spoken, but we just need more of him. And that was a position slated to be deleted. It was deleted in our budget several years ago, and I went to bat, and we got that position, and we have a successful prosecution unit and expertise in that area. We just would love to increase it.
Thank you. Your 1 minute rebuttal.
No rebuttal.
Next question is number 15. This is to Mrs. Egan. The question is, do you, and again this is in reference to the Office of the District Attorney, do you support restorative justice programs like the Victim Offenders Reconciliation Program? How would you incorporate these programs?
Before I took office in 2003, I started meeting with the Restorative Justice Group out of Fresno Pacific. They're very focused, they're very good, they're worldwide experts in restorative justice, and it's right here in Fresno. Our chief deputy at Juvenile designed the criteria for the Board of Restorative Justice in the juvenile arena. We decided which crimes would be eligible and started early, right at arraignment in the juvenile court on whether this case is eligible. And we worked with the court, defense bar, and it's been it's the only problem we've had with restorative justice in the county is we keep asking, let's track it. As your DA, I'm obligated to protect the public. And I said, let's find out if it's working. And if it isn't, let's go back with those cases and see where we missed, especially in the juvenile arena. And then we can move to the adult arena when we know what works. And it's kind of hard with a lot of programs to get the follow-up data. everybody's understaffed and they want to get the case, they want to get the restorative justice started, they really don't want to come back around and analyze it. And we keep working with them on that. We had a graduate student come and evaluate the program and to see which cases were working. And it's a very valuable tool, and I think the youth courts are going to be another very valuable tool and we support all those. We're stakeholders in those. My only touchstone is it working? Are we keeping the public safe?
Yes, well, I had a meeting with one of the directors of the Restorative Justice Program, and that was not the information that I received. In fact, the people who are doing the Restorative Justice Program in Fresno are one of the many nonprofits and organizations in mental health and substance abuse, child abuse prevention that have actually reached out to me and said, what are your thoughts on this, because we do not get cooperation from the DA's office. We currently have a victim offender reconciliation program working at Juvenile Hall. I was specifically instructed by Mrs. Keenan's Chief Assistant District Attorney, Mr. Keenan, that I was not to participate in the victim offender reconciliation program when I was supervising the domestic violence unit, because Judge David Gottlieb, who's been a crusader in VORP, as we call it, wanted to talk about bringing it into the adult court of domestic violence, and I was told in no uncertain terms that I was not to participate in that discussion. So I'm not really sure where all that's coming from, but what I do know is this: I'm a big fan of VORP. It is a fantastic program, and for those of you in the room who don't know what it is an opportunity for the victims and the offenders to get together and talk about what happened. It's an opportunity for the victims to say to the defendant, you messed up my life by stealing my car. This is what happened to my kids. This is what happened to my house. We didn't sleep. My kids had nightmares because you stole the car out of our driveway. And it's an opportunity for the defendant to apologize, to make restitution, and to attempt to make it right. And the goal of VORP is it's completely voluntary, but it's to keep kids out of the system. And I had the benefit of attending a seminar at Fresno City College, and a lady was there whose husband was killed by a 14-year-old kid. And she said if that kid had been in the system and gone through a VORP program, maybe he wouldn't have killed my husband. It's a great program. It should be expanded as soon as we can.
I agree. I think we need to put more resources into the program and following up and making sure it works, and that we're utilizing it correctly. I think it works. We just have to keep monitoring it and always going to the best practice within victim reconciliation.
Thank you. Our last question of the evening. No applause, by the way. Our last question, Ms. Lisa, it's to you. What is the most complicated / difficult case you have ever personally taken to trial? Do you think prior trial experience is necessary in being a district attorney?
This is my second favorite topic. You cannot lead an office when you have not been in the shoes of the people that you lead. I've spent my life being a trial prosecutor, taking cases to trial. The most difficult case that I ever prosecuted was the People versus Dijon Baskin. It took me away from my family for 45 days. It was an attempted murder of 3 victims. How they lived is still a miracle. The wife had her throat sliced open. Her mother had her throat sliced open. The wife was shot in the head and her brother was shot in the head. It was one of the most emotionally charged, difficult cases because the defendant was a United States Marine, and he was claiming to have PTSD when he didn't have it. It was the greatest challenge and the biggest blessing of my life, and I'm proud to stand here and say that after 3.5 years, Dijon Baskin is doing 77 years to life in the California Department of Corrections. He will never hurt anyone again. And until you have walked in the shoes, until you have been in the dirt with the police officers, how do you know? And I say to people, if Shaquille O'Neal was a point guard for the Lakers, they wouldn't have had the success that they did with Shaquille as a center. If you haven't played basketball, how do you know where to put your players? Mrs. Egan's trial records, her personal trial statistics, I have requested. They have not been provided to me. And I would
challenge her tonight to tell us about her trial experience, because I have tried homicide cases, I have tried sexual assault cases, rape cases, child molest cases, domestic violence cases. I have bonded with victims. I have been in the trenches. I have made them trust me. And that's why I'm the right person to lead this office and train young lawyers to become the prosecutors we need them to be, so that Fresno County can be safer.
Almost finished. Ms. Egan, your 2-minute response.
You know, personnel records are encompass trial records because we use those to evaluate. So my opponent wants to release a trial record? Absolutely. You can see my trial record anytime. You know, I was in business for 10 years. I was a prosecutor for 7. In the 4 years I did felony trials, I did 19 felony trials. I did carjacking, rape, robbery, attempted murder. I've been in the trenches. I was on my way up in the office when I took the opportunity to run for office. I have been the elected district attorney now for 11 years, and I know what it takes to be the elected district attorney. It's possible to be in court trying cases as the DA. It's not practical, because who's going to be doing my job? Judge, would you ask the defendant to waive his Sixth Amendment rights because the chairman of the board wants to cut my budget? I've got to run over there. It's not practical. But the fact is, it's just a reasonable lack of understanding of what the district attorney's job is. The district attorney's job is, we have 256 employees. We have 20 or 30 clerks, and volunteers and students. We have legislation. I'm fighting for legislation to protect victims and to keep offenders accountable. That is part of the job of the district attorney. No district attorney in any county of any size is in court because if they are, they're not doing their job. But let's compare records.
Why don't you bring your records?
I want to make sure that I didn't cut you off. Are you done?
Sure, yeah.
You should have time. I just want to make sure that I didn't.
If you want me to, I will.
No, we're not taking any audience responses. I just want to make sure that I didn't cut the district attorney Egan off. And she's done, so you're 1 minute rebuttal.
The person who is the district attorney of the county of Fresno, or any county for that matter, has to be a person of integrity. It has to be a person who is going to be honest and truthful. And I have a copy of my personnel file that I took when I left the DA's office that I got. And my trial stats are nowhere in that file. Trial stats are public records. They should be available to anybody who wants them. And for Mrs. Egan and her cronies in the county who want to protect those records, because I would bet every toe on my left foot that she does not have 19 felony trials. And if she does, then good for her. I'd like to see them. She became the district attorney in 2003 after running for election, and she was in the office since 1995 or 96. So I don't know anybody that got to do that many felony trials. So what I would say is show us your records, Mrs. Egan. Provide that information to us, because I would love to see it. And if you think that going to meetings and being on committees is what being the DA is about, it is not. You have to inspire and lead.
Thank you. And so with that, the first person with the closing statement will be our current district attorney, Ms. Elizabeth Egan.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. It's a great example of the citizens being involved in elective office. You're right, the district attorney's office is a very, very important office, and maybe there isn't a more important office in this county because we deal with people's liberty interests. And so I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank my opponent for being here. I am proud and I'm honored to be serving as a district attorney. I have the strong support of Sheriff Margaret Mims, Sheriff Steve McGarrion, and Richard Pierce, law enforcement officers who have run the largest law enforcement agency in the county for decades and understand what the job is, and they strongly support me. The Deputy Sheriff's Association, the correctional sergeants, Mike Reynolds, the father of 3 strikes. There is no stronger victims' rights advocate than Mike Reynolds, whose daughter was murdered. Victims' rights groups have made a unanimous decision, and they've supported my candidacy and have endorsed me. Crime Victims United, Citizens for Law and Order, Crime Victims Action Alliance. They know that my focus is victims. It's the victim that counts. And our job in the justice system is to ensure fair, even-handed justice. And that's what we do in the District Attorney's Office in Fresno. I chair the Multi-Agency Gang Enforcement Consortium, which is MAGIC. It's an incredibly effective crime-fighting organization, state, federal, local law enforcement officers and prosecutors all working together, and they're experts, and we're recognized nationally for the work we do in MAGIC, and they work as a team, and they're focused and effective. Since I took office, we have revolutionized the fight on gangs. It's not just going and sweeping up gangs, it's releasing neighborhoods from their grip, and we've done that 7 times, all over the county, Orange Cove, Reedley, Sanger, and in Fresno. And we're going to continue to do that because that's about victims of the gangs. We've instituted elder abuse unit, identity theft. We have experts in identity theft that did not exist a few years ago, real estate fraud, public integrity, and we are stakeholders on the ground floor in programs to redirect juvenile offenders. Our conviction rate in 2013 was 92%. That means we have a well-oiled machine of people working really hard every day. They're the best, they're professional, I match anywhere in the state. Our prosecutors, our investigators, and our support staff. And I'm proud of my accomplishments as DA, the fact that we have ridden this economy up and down and kept the public safe. Crime is down. It takes leadership and experience to do this, and I provide both, and that's why I'm endorsed by the sheriff. I brought change to this office. The fact that I did an 18-month campaign and was elected, that I promoted the first African American, Hispanic, female to top posts in one of the top offices in the state. I've been a game changer, and we have a track record in this office of making tough decisions, doing the right things for the right reason. And I appreciate your vote.
Next, we will hear from the challenger. I'm going to do this correctly. Ms. Lisa Sondergaard Smittcamp.
All right. Thank you for all the organizations who invited us here today. I have to apologize because I get fired up. There's a big fire in this big belly, and that is for justice. And that is because outside of being a mother to my 2 beautiful children, this is my passion. This is my life's work. When I took a job in the Madera County DA's office, my mom called me and said, well, kid, you took a $30,000 pay cut to go work in the DA's office. What do you think about it? And I said, Mom, I do this job for free. This is it for me. It is my dream job. And I'm standing here because the administration of the current district attorney's office has prevented me from ethically continuing to follow my passion and to do the work that God has called me to do. That's why I'm standing here tonight. I was born here. I was raised here. I love this community. I raised my family in this community. My husband's family is ingrained in this community. And I am here to say that Fresno County deserves better. Has Mrs. Egan accomplished things? Yes, she has. But she has also had a lot of failings. And we need leadership in this county. As the person who is the top law enforcement official, this person has to have integrity. This person has to be honest. This person has to be a brother coach. And for somebody to run a campaign saying that they are law enforcement's choice, when they stand in front of you and tell you that they are endorsed by interest groups from Sacramento, such as Crime Victims United, people who've never met Mrs. Egan. She will, I'm anticipating we're going to have a big media campaign saying that she's endorsed by 30,000 law enforcement officers. Those are 30,000 members of the California Correctional Officers in Sacramento who gave her $10,000 a couple weeks ago, who've never met her. I am endorsed not only by Chief Dyer, proudly endorsed by the Fresno Police Officers Association, the Reedley Police Officers Association, Sanger, Mendota, Coalinga, Fresno Fire. I am endorsed by Mrs. Egan's own investigators, her own law enforcement staff inside her office, many of whom are here tonight, are endorsing me because they know that the DA's office is a managerial disaster. I got into this. This was not my dream. If things weren't broken at the DA's office, I'd be sitting in my desk prosecuting domestic violence cases. I took this responsibility and I took on this task out of a sense of responsibility because judges, defense attorneys, prosecutors, and civil attorneys asked me to do it. They encouraged me. They said, you have the integrity, you have the experience, and you have the ability to run a campaign. Get up and do it. And that's how I was raised. Every day you wake up and you have the responsibility to do what it is that God has given you the ability to do. And that's why I'm here. And that's why I'm running.
I care about Fresno, and I want to be the role model that I had as a young prosecutor coming up. People like Don Penner, people like Bob Freed, people who were ADAs at the time that I was coming up. I want to be that for young people.
Thank you for the time.